You want to press the button, or is it's already on? Okay. Then you might have to take that off. Yeah, you might have to take that off. Okay, so we're going to learn a mimer together, a difficult mimer with some issues in it, which, if in the middle of it, anyone finds it a bit too hard, you just switch off for a few seconds and coast. Most of it, everybody will find you can deal with very comfortably. The mimer is a very famous mimer. It's called the Havaninian Tchias HaMesim, which is the concept of the revival of the dead. And I'm doing this mimer because there are areas of our belief system which many people, if they know about them, struggle with them. And the two areas, from my experience, that people struggle with most, including me, are the concept of Mashiach and the concept of life after death. And life after death is joked about by so many people because who can really describe it? Nobody's been there, come back to tell us about it, all those jokes. However, we have, there's probably more rubbish talked about life after death by many religions. We hold it to be rubbish by many religions. Obviously, there's some truths in it, but much of it is not part of our belief system. And the Rebbeim, particularly the Chabad Rebbeim, that's what I teach, Chabad Hasidus, our Rebbes are very selective about what they say about life after death, but what they do say is very precise. So in other words, instead of there being a kind of general flummery about the concept of life after death, when the Rebbeim talk about it and when they teach the Hasidus on this, it's very specific, very accurate. The vocabulary is very lean and very constant. So we're going to explore some of these concepts together, but rather than just exploring the concepts for the sake of the concepts themselves, which is kind of, to some extent, useless. I don't want to say that because obviously it's not useless if the Rebbeim are explaining it, but it needs to be in context. And the context that I'd like you to keep in mind, because we've got a bit of a journey before we get back to it, is this dilemma and we had this dilemma. I articulated it with you guys together for the first Shir on Purim, the second Shir on Purim, which compared Purim to the Holocaust, and generally speaking, it's at the forefront of our consciousness at the moment, and that is the fact that we, Am Yisrael, are at war, and it's a tough war, and at the moment, so far, God forbid, we're not winning. Would you agree, Ryan? I mean, we're not winning at the moment. Huh?
By the judge?
No, but you've got relatives there, so I've got relatives there.
I don't think we're losing either.
I didn't say we're losing, but at the moment it's been going a long time, and we're not winning, and we're suffering. And the question is, the more important, the more fundamental question is, we believe in Hashgacha Pratis, we believe in divine providence, we believe that Hashem is bringing the world into existence every moment. Everything that's happening is happening by design. We know there is only good coming from Hashem. So how do we rationalize what happened in October 7 or whatever it is, and the suffering that we see all around us, both directly from that I mean, you don't have to go. You go back to the Holocaust. You go back to the Crusades. You go back to our history is a history of a river of blood, and the issue. One of the issues that we need to deal with as believing Jews is that we have to be able to reconcile the fact that everything that Hashem does is by Hashgacha Pratis and for the good, and yet we have suffering. And the suffering that we have is not mild suffering, it's deep, deep suffering. So what the question really is what's going on, and to help understand that question, one has to expand one's intellectual experience beyond life in one neshama in one guf for one period of time, one gilgul, one lifetime. And because if a Jew understands something about the structure of Olam Haba, the world to come, and what sort of life, if any, there is after death, then it helps to make sense of the balance sheet that we have with our God. And you know, the Rebbe celebrated people having a balance sheet with God. If you don't feel a level of criticism in your heart to the God you love, the Rebbe was fond of saying that the more you feel it, the more passionate you're religious and the more passionate you're a believer in God. Because at the end of the day, if you didn't feel that, why would you feel outraged when you're confronted by suffering? If it was just the law of the jungle of the dog eat dog, then who cares? Why do we care so much? Because we have a God that we love, and we can't imagine how it's possible that he can not only tolerate but orchestrate this level of suffering. So, and let me make that more clear and highlight it further. We're talking about not only suffering but evil, pure evil. The evil that these people had when they came and attacked on October 7 or whatever the date was, raping our women, beheading our children, burning and looting, and anyone who's seen any parts of the videos, it's just so appalling that if you don't have an argument with your God, then there's something wrong with you. And there have been attempts to explain this by various people, and when I say attempts, it's not an attempt. The Rebbe has said this clearly when Elie Wiesel asked him where was God in the Holocaust. The Rebbe's answer to Elie Wiesel was, don't ask me where God was, where was man? And that's really the issue. So let's start with this. And this is the journey we're going to be taking. We learn in Torah, in Nigla, but it's brought out much more in Chassidus. We don't have time for it in detail, but very quickly, that Hashem created everything in the world in one step, through speech, as we've learned. Vayomer Hashem Yehi Oed, Hashem said, let there be light, and there was light. One step, one verbal, as it were, pronunciation. Verbal in the sense that it's an external level of godliness. When it came to creating humanity in general, Adam Rishon in particular, it's two steps. Hashem gathered the ground, formed up the ground, and breathed into the formed piece of ground a nishmas chaim, a breath of life. And it says that he blew into the thing a breath of life, meaning the code for that is that it came from inside, an internal level, a much deeper level than the level of speech. Now, a fascinating and beautiful perspective that you need to keep in mind as we travel tonight is that just as God breathes out, God breathes in. And the neshama that is breathed out into that guf is also, just as it's exhaled, it's inhaled. And the statement, is there life after death, is really a grammatically nonsensical statement, because what we are talking about when we talk about death is the separation of the neshama from the guf. That the guf deteriorates, okay, but the neshama doesn't. And the neshama is drawn back to its source. There's a journey, which we're going to learn in a minute. It has to go, there's a journey that is made, but what is really happening is that the enlivening energy is being withdrawn from the instrument. So an example I've often heard, and you may have heard this example before, take a fridge. You have a refrigerator in the kitchen, it's plugged into the wall, it's plugged into electricity. While it's plugged into the electricity, the fridge is functioning, it's cold, keeps the. If you pull the plug out from the wall, the fridge dies. The food inside gets rotten, and everything in the fridge is no longer functional. But what happened to the electricity? Is it dead? Is it gone? It's not gone. Electricity isn't gone. It's withdrawn from the instrument and continues. Where does it continue? You have to be an engineer and a scientist, but it continues exactly the same way as it did before it was plugged in, and after it was plugged into the fridge. So it is with the neshama. When Hashem inhales, as it were, he is inhaling that energy, that life force, that part of Hashem, which is a Helik Elokah Mimal, that part of Hashem, he is withdrawing back to a source, leaving behind the guf. So when we talk about death, we talk about a termination of an experience as we know it, maybe, we don't know. But the Rebbeim explain that the experience that exists then is Olam Haba, the world to come. And the Rebbeim in general, the Rebbe in particular, and in this Maimah in particular, delineates what Olam Haba is. Now, we haven't got time to go through the whole Maimah in absolute detail and depth, but I'm going to try and give you some broad brushstrokes. The first thing that the Rebbe does in the Maimah is to distinguish between two different meanings of the word Olam Haba. Olam Haba literally means the world to come, and it's divided into Gan Eden, which is a familiar term for everybody, and Tchias HaMesim. Tchias HaMesim means a revival of the dead. And the revival of the dead is, I don't know about you guys, but for me, it is without study and without avoider, a very difficult concept to imagine. My friend and teacher, Rabbi Philman, once told me a very interesting thing. He told me that after Mashiach comes, and Mashiach coming and after Mashiach comes, and all the things that flow on from into Olam Haba are all going to be natural. They are, how do we know? We've seen evidence of it. We've seen evidence of things that 50, 100 years ago people had no idea of. DNA. They had no idea of DNA. They had no idea of how many cells there are in a human organism. They had no idea. For example, we have a piece of Torah that when there's Tchias HaMesim, which I'll define in a minute, the resurrection of the dead, the body is rebuilt from the luz bone. The luz bone is a tiny little bone. And it's almost indestructible. In fact, one of the terribly sad things that people found in Auschwitz and Treblinka when they were shoveling away the ashes, Nebok, was there were these tiny little white spots, and those tiny little white spots are the luz bone. Now, we've learned through Dolly, for anybody who remembers who Dolly was, that they reconstructed a sheep from a tiny piece of sheep DNA. So Rabbi Filman's point to me was that you don't have to marvel that this is going to happen miraculously. It will happen naturally. We just don't have, as yet, the mechanical ability to do it. But it's and certainly it's not far away, because Yemosha Mashiach's not far away. That's another, we'll come to that too. So the world to come is divided into Gan Eden and Olam Haba, Tchias HaMesim. And there is, explains Chassidus, the following difference. Gan Eden is a place of schar, of reward. It's a reward for learning Torah and living a life of integrity. So we have a piece of Tillim that everybody knows when you go to the Hebrew Kadisha. It's one of the things that they read, that who is allowed to ascend on the, whatever translation of the mountain is. He has to have clean hands and a pure heart. What does it mean, clean hands and a pure heart? It means that he has to have integrity and learn Torah. And we learn, there's a Gemara, an open Gemara, which says that in Gan Eden, when a neshama is in Gan Eden, it is involved with learning Torah all day and all night, but it can only learn the Torah it's learned while it's alive, in a guf. So that's why that's a motivating fact for those people who have the time and have the ability and have the ability to sit on their tuchus and learn, and to learn, because they know that when they go to Gan Eden after 120 years, that they'll be able to learn. Hello. Now, the business of being in Gan Eden is a business of reaping that reward for learning Torah, but understand this, that it is a state of being for the neshama. The neshama, there's no guf in Gan Eden, there's only the neshama in Gan Eden, and the neshama's job in Gan Eden is to go from level to level and to increase the depth and richness and wealth of their Torah knowledge that they learned on this earth, orchestrated by the levels of integrity that they lived. And if a person doesn't measure up to that, that chair's broken. Can I get you to get one from down there? And say l'chaim. I'm going to interrupt especially. Give him a l'chaim and him. I'll pause it.
So one or two?
I've paused it.
A little bit of
Of course he does.
more. Or
More's good. Thank you. Kind.
L'chaim. In 2 weeks you can't have it, so.
Find the book.
We are learning a mimer, the Indian, Lahavan Indian Tkiasa Mesiak, and then ultimately there is Tkiasa Mesim. And Tkiasa Mesim is the jackpot. And what's so difficult to deal with is that to most people it's counterintuitive, it's difficult to believe in, we don't have any experience of it, and we don't really understand why it's important that there should be Tkiasa Mesim. And the short answer to that, so that everybody knows where this is going, is where we were at the beginning, that we have a problem of evil. We have a problem of a God that we love who is defining existence by his Hashgacha Pratis, and that he is not only allowing but tolerating and orchestrating what we see as pure evil. And we need to come to terms with the fact that we learn that nothing that comes from God, let me rephrase that, everything that comes from God is only good. And we don't understand that because there is such an apparent dichotomy between that statement and some of our experience. So let me try and give you a moshel from, it says that you can give a moshel from a negative. Let me take a practical. You have computer scams. You take a person like me, I'm next to a computer idiot. I can do a bit, but I don't understand much about it. So I'm told by the coaches who run the computers in our office, we have these shurim on how not to get raped and pillaged, and they tell me that if you get something, they're phishing or whatever it is, and you don't answer, you don't reply. But why don't you reply? Because then they can get your bank account, and then they get your bank account, they can empty it, and they can send it there. So there is this whole dark web world where these crooks from Nigeria, whoever they are, armies of people who have hugely sophisticated computer systems which work automatically, clean out bank accounts, send it to banks all over the world. One bank had to, untraceable, etc., etc. Right? What do I see of that? What do I see? I see a computer screen. That's all I see. I don't know anything about what they're doing. I don't know anything about the software. I don't know anything about the programs. I don't know where the banks are. I don't know how the bank accounts work. I don't understand how they clean out my money. I don't understand why if I reply to something, that's going to trigger a whole nuclear reaction of thousands and thousands of movements of computer. I don't see that. And lahavdil, that's how we live. We live in a physical Gashmias life, and every now and again we notice the extraordinary logic of nature and the extraordinary power of the various energies that exist in our lives. But it's a very superficial level. And at the end of the day, we've had many shurims on this, on Amunah and how we have to deal with the Nisyonis, with the tests and problems that we have, but they're still at a very superficial pedestrian level. And that's how it should be to a large extent, because at the end of the day, we are neshamas in gufim, and we are not up to Gan Eden yet, and we're not up to Mashiach yet, and we're not up to Tkiasa Mesim yet. But it's very helpful to know something about those states, because you then get some kind of idea of perspective of what your life is about. And that it's not just 60, 70, 120 years in a guf, struggling to pay the mortgage, beating off the thieves, fighting the traffic, dealing with all the tiny little inconveniences and massive inconveniences of life. It is certainly about all of that, but all of that is purposeful and for a reason. And the first reason is the ability to get into Gan Eden. The second reason is to make a dira b'tachtonim, as we've learned over and over again, so that there can be the days of Mashiach, because the days of Mashiach come when there is a dira b'tachtonim. But ultimately, it's for Tchias HaMesim. It's for this period of the revival of the dead. Now, what's so special about Tchias HaMesim? Just as Gan Eden is a reward for learning Torah, Tchias HaMesim is the product of doing mitzvahs. But we have a problem. We have a pasuk which we say between Pesach and Shavuos. We say Pirkei Avos every week, every Shabbos. And when we say that, there's an introduction. The introduction is, as everybody knows, Kol Yisrael yesh lachem helek la'olam haba. That's how it starts. That all Israel have a portion in the world to come. So the Rebbe explains in this Maimah what world to come. It can't be Gan Eden, because we just learned that Gan Eden is a scarf for learning Torah and living a life of integrity. You don't live a life of integrity. You don't learn Torah. You live like an animal. You've got to go through a washing machine. So you go through Gehenna. It's not a bad place. It's not a place for barbecuing you and giving you pain the way the Christians talk about it. It's a washing machine. It cleanses the neshama so that it can gain entry into Gan Eden. And so not everybody dies and goes to Gan Eden straight away, if ever. But it says that Kol Yisrael yesh lachem, all Jews have a portion in Olam, in Olam Haba. What does that mean? It means Tchias HaMesim. How come? So we learn that every Jew is as full of mitzvahs as a pomegranate is of seeds. That's also a Gemara. And it means this, that you're doing mitzvahs while you sleep. You're doing mitzvahs while you walk. You're doing mitzvahs when you smile at somebody. You're doing mitzvahs when you help a lady across the road. We're not talking about a Jew who performs 613 mitzvahs when they're available, 365 negative, 248 positive. We're talking about a Jew who lives. A Jew who lives does mitzvahs, inevitably, can't help it. So if he's doing mitzvahs inevitably, whatever number of mitzvahs they are, there's a definition of a tzaddik as being a person who does mitzvahs. Not all the mitzvahs. So the pasuk goes on to say that because all Jews are tzaddikim, and they're going to inherit various things which we won't go into now. So all Jews, because of the fact that they access some level of performance of mitzvahs, merit Tchias HaMesim. And why is that so terrific? Why is that so special, this Tchias HaMesim? So it's about a very deep concept. We won't spend too long on it because I want to get back to evil. But the concept is this, that what we crave, what every Jew craves, whether it's subconscious or not, is a Giloi Elokus, is a revelation of godliness. That's what we want. We want to see God. We want to talk to him. We want to hug. We want to have him explain to us why this went wrong, that went wrong, how wonderful this is. We want to share with him how wonderful this is, how wonderful that is. So for a Jew, the jackpot is a Giloi Elokus, is a revelation of godliness. Now, the lowest level of revelation of godliness is in the lowest of all the four possible worlds. We haven't time to go through the worlds. But that's this world. This world, in this world, there is almost no Gilui Elokus. There's almost no obvious revelation of godliness. Almost none. We don't see God bringing into existence this table. We see a table with a white tablecloth because it's probably been left over from Shabbos. So we see a table. We don't see God bringing into existence a table. Now, the level of perceived godliness in the next level, which is Gan Eden, is much stronger. So much so that it says there that what does a neshama do? It sits and basks in the pleasure of the Ziv HaShekhinah. Ziv HaShekhinah means radiation of godliness, of revealed godliness. But it's only a Ziv. It's not God. It's a ray. It's a reflection. Manifestation. Yeah, but it's not obvious. It's not as obvious as an essence is obvious. Then by this time, the neshamas that are in Gan Eden's progeny and offspring and neshamas that come down into various other Gilgulim, we haven't time for that. They have by this time made a Dirivatachtoinim. And when they make the Dirivatachtoinim, we have the precipitation of Mashiach. And when Mashiach comes, we have a new level of Gilui Elokus. What do you think when the tzaddikim are screaming for Mashiach? They're not screaming because they want a new Ferrari, because we're told that when Mashiach comes, everything's going to be beautiful and terrific, and everybody's going to be rich, and we're going to have peace, and the lamb will lie down with the wolf, and all good things. Agreed. But that's not why that's not why tzaddikim want Mashiach. Tzaddikim want Mashiach so that we have a Gilui Elokus that shows us why everything is wonderful. Really wonderful. And then you have the highest level. And the highest level is in Tchias HaMesim, because in Tchias HaMesim there is a full revelation of godliness in Atzmus. That means in his essence. I'm going to say this quickly for those that can follow it, those that can't just coast for a minute. We learn that when a Jew is in Gan Eden, he is the Ziv HaShekhinah, he is connecting to Hashem's Chokhmah. Torah, which is what he learns in Gan Eden, is Chokhmah, is Hashem's Chokhmah. It's his wisdom. That's what we learn all the time. In the days of Mashiach, to a lower level, and in the days of Tchias HaMesim, we are being connected to Hashem's Rotzen. Rotzen, will, is higher than Chokhmah. In the days of Mashiach, I'm just doing this quickly, but in the days of Mashiach, it's at a level of Rotzen, but in the time of Tchias HaMesim, it's at a higher level still, which is called Tainug. Tainug means pleasure. If you can imagine, as a poor Gashmistic example, you have 20 little kids in a swimming pool and you're supervising them. They're all lovely and nobody's misbehaving and they're being cute as anything and they're being terrific and they're playing nicely. But one of them's your son. You can't tell me you don't feel something different to your son. What do you feel different to your son? Atzmus to atzmus, essence to essence. It's the same cute kid, with 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 ears, smiling, playing, happy, sweet, polite. Alavai. But let's pretend. But when one of them is your kid, then you feel completely different. Am Yisrael is created by Hashem to do a specific job of bringing Gashmis into Ruknis into Gashmis and elevating Gashmis into Ruknis. And for that we are given an extra neshama and we have responsibilities with that, and we are not better or worse than a non-Jew, but we have a different pathway and a different set of responsibilities. And those responsibilities are revealed essence to essence in Tiasa Mesim. Okay, now, l'chaim. There is a part that we're not going to have time for, but I'm going to mention it for completeness because it's in the Maimah, and that is this: that there is a difference between, a lot of terms in Torah are in Babi language, but they're in code. They're in very deep code. The words Gan Eden are very, very deep code. Gan is one reality, Eden is another. We learn that man has never seen Gan Eden. How's that possible? Adam Rishon, we know, was in Gan Eden. Hava was in Gan Eden. Animals were in Gan Eden. But they were in the Gan. They weren't in the Eden. They were in the garden. They were in the front lawn or the back lawn or the surrounding lawn. They weren't in the castle. What's in the castle? The tainug, this level of tainug of Hashem, a level of atzmus, a level of essence. And it says that in Gan Eden, people are going to have the ziv ashkina. But why? Why the ziv ashkina? Because it's only the garden. It's not the Eden. When we have Tchias HaMesim, it says there will be a Giloi of Eden. So, how particularly present is this in your and my reality when we go out of the door and we finish the Shia? Not much. But it helps to know where it is, because the more you learn it, the more it becomes a reference post for you and for me. And that reference post is very important, because we know that those stages of Gashmias, followed by Gan Eden, followed by Mashiach, followed by Tchias HaMesim, suddenly changes a very limited vision of your existence to a very wide and broad and deep understanding of what Hashem is orchestrating here. You're not going to, maybe you're going to be like Kremnizer and not understand how it works when they rip you off and take all the money out of your bank account and send it all around the world. I don't get it, but at least I know it happens. So at least we should know that this is in back of our existence at the moment, and it helps us understand. We have a Gemara that says that Hashem made nothing for nothing. There's no such thing as anything in Bria, in creation, Levatola, for nothing. What does that mean? It means that the obvious meaning is that a mosquito has a purpose, a cockroach has a purpose, a banana has a purpose. That's the obvious meaning. But let me give you a much deeper thing to reflect on one day when you're walking. That's why every leaf, you get, let's pretend there are 1,000 species of trees. I don't know how many there are. Pretend there's 1,000. The leaves from one tree to another tree are different. They're different. They're different leaves. They're obviously different in size and shape. But that's not the big kunz. On each of those species, that's a genus. On the species, on each tree, the leaves are different one to the other. There are no two leaves the same on the tree. Why not? Because if one leaf was the same as another leaf, there'd be no point in creating it. Because Hashem doesn't create anything levatola for nothing. It must be a specific purpose that leaf has got. Now, how much more so is that true of human beings? Each one of us sitting around the table, we may be male, we may be living in Australia, we may have many, many connecting aspects, but we are entirely different. We've discovered this with DNA. And why are we entirely different? because each of us have a different shlichus. And what about our abilities and the things that we can function with or not function with, the things that we can achieve or not achieve? It's not always effort. It may be a function of how you're hardwired. And why are you hardwired like that? Because it's your job to elevate this leaf on the ground, or this argument, or this refusal to put somebody down in public, or this opportunity to help another person with money or support. And you're going to get the exact, we do this over and over again, you're going to get the exact circumstance for you, who are created especially for that circumstance, to be able to deal with that Nisoyan. And all of that resonates much more clearly when we understand that it's not just today in Kremnizer's dining room and going home to fight with the guy who nearly drives into you at the intersection because he's half drunk, or whatever the problem is. That's the superficial layer. Very important, because that's why we were born. That's why our neshama's in the guf, to deal with all of those nisyonis. In the words of the Tzemach Tzedek in Derek Mitzvah Sefer in the first or second Maimah, he says, the only reason, not one reason, the only reason the neshama has a yerida into a guf, a descent into a body, is for nisyonis, is for challenges. That's the only reason you're born. So those challenges are critically important, but they're only part of the big picture. And the big picture is not just Gashmias, it's Gan Eden, it's the time of Mashiach, and it's Tchias HaMeisim. And there are 4 levels of Giloi Elikus. There are 4 levels of we have a difficulty in dealing with a Giloi Elikus until we switch on the switch. We all have a switch. You can daven, you can learn Torah. Everybody here knows that there are times when you don't concentrate, when you do it by heart, you do it by rote. But there are times that it's really meaningful. There's a time when you really get a hug from your God. There's a time when you stretch out your arms and grab him around the neck and give him a kiss. And they're wonderful moments. It's the difference between Yaakov and Yisrael. When we're in our Yaakov mode, we're living ordinary Gashmis. When we're in our Yisrael mode, we are able to hug our God. But the level of revealed Elokus is still Gashmis. It's still physicality. But after that, we have these other stages. Now, how do we know that? What proof is there of that? We know that from Torah. And Torah is nitzchis, it's eternal, it's true, it applies to every Jew in every generation, it's immutable. And if we have, as a matter of Torah, a statement about Gan Eden, or a statement about the days of Mashiach, or a statement about Tchias HaMeisim, then we know it's true. So although we're running out of time, let's go back to this problem of evil. Because in all of this lovely ability to fit yourself, hopefully, into some kind of purposeful living, as opposed to just existing, the problem is going to keep coming back to anybody with any sensitivity of the 7th of October, of rape, of beheadings, of spearing children on poles. I mean, who can even fathom these things? And the fact is that when people like Elie Wiesel, it's in a video, you can watch it on Gem, when he complained to Hashem on about God, the Rebbe, when he complained to the Rebbe, about Hashem, the Rebbe answered him. The Rebbe applauded him, and the Rebbe was basically saying, "It's a wonderful question. It's a wonderful question because that's the level of belief that you have, that you are plagued by this question." So, what's the answer to this? The answer to this is really, really short. And it needs a lifetime of avoider to understand it. And that is that God knows what he's doing. We don't have access to Gan Eden and what's happening there. We don't have access to what's going to be happening in the days of Mashiach. We don't have access in what's going to be happening in Tchias HaMesim. We only have access to what we see right now. One page of a book. One word of one line of one page of one book. We don't know what came before. We don't know what's coming after. We don't know what was in previous Gilgulim. We don't know what Hashem's agenda is. We don't know any of those things. What we do know is that we have a shlichus. Am Yisrael, when we learn over and over again about making a dira b'taktoinim and having bringing down Ruchnius into Gashmius and elevating Gashmius into Ruchnius, you can reduce that to a much more simple equation. It has been our shlichus since the time of Mount Sinai to separate good from bad, to fight evil with good, to bring light to darkness. That is our shlichus. And we don't understand the nuclear reaction that takes place when we do convert evil into good. And don't think we haven't done it. Just as the Gentiles have been building Gashmias with our help, we have been infusing that Gashmias with Ruchnias. Gentiles have hospitals. Gentiles have things to look after the sick. They have courts of justice. They have some sort of level of sexual morality. Depends where you live in the world, but there is some level of it. And we have been a light to the nations to a certain extent. But our job is to be a light to the nations and to beat evil with good. And now I'm going to tell you something that Rabbi Philman told me. We were talking about something else and he brought this up. It's such a deep, wonderful thing. Earlier in the Torah than where we are at the moment, there's the episode with the snare, with the burning bush. Everybody knows the story of the burning bush. And everybody knows that Hashem calls Moshe. Moshe sees the burning bush. He sees that the bush isn't being consumed, and he's frightened. And he wants to understand. And Hashem calls him because Hashem wants to show him the purpose of evil. This is a midrash, that he wants to show him the purpose of evil. And we learn and what do we learn in the Torah? We learn that Moshe is about to go and he turns away. He hides his face. And he's scared. What's he scared of? So we have a piece of Chabad Hasidus, can only be Chabad Hasidus. He said what he was afraid of was this, that if Hashem showed him the purpose of evil, he'd understand it. Because from Hashem's perspective, there's only good. The evil is our perspective. If he saw that the evil was really only good, he wouldn't fight it anymore. What's to fight? He gets it. And then he sells out humanity for a slice of godliness. Do you understand this? He's selling out his humanity for a slice of godliness. And the humanity is precious. Humanity is the only thing that can do the job. The job of beating evil has been given to humanity by Hashem. That's the structure of the world. That's the structure of the universe. That's the structure of Gashmias and Gan Eden and Tchias HaMesim and the whole 4 levels that we've been through. And in order to do that, we are bashed and beaten every day by our Nisyonis, and we push from pillar to post with our Nisyonis, and we see that as evil. And we should see it as evil because we have to beat it. To beat it, we have to see it as evil. So it's lovely to be reassured that there's no bad coming from Hashem. But when your neighbor is in pain, you've got to put your arm around him and help him. Why? Because he's in pain. No good sitting there and lecturing him that only good comes from Hashem. You've got to fix his pain. And we are shluchim to get that job done. And in order to get that job done, it helps to understand the dynamic of the bigger picture. And that's why the Rebbeim go through these Maimorim. I assume, I can't think for a Rebbe. So, we run out of time. L'chaim, I hope it means something to you. Yeah. So how's Rara?